Hello, everyone. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Business, Housing, and Zoning Committee for July 9th, 2024. I'm Jeremiah Ellison, and I will be chairing this committee due to CM Osmond's absence. And before we begin the meeting, I want to offer a friendly reminder to all members, staff, and the public that these meetings are broadcast live to enable greater public participation. These broadcasts include real-time captioning. Thank you to our captioner. As a further method to increase the accessibility of our proceedings to the community. Therefore, all speakers need to be mindful of the rate of their speech so that our captioners can fully capture and transcribe all comments for the broadcast. We ask all speakers to moderate the speed and clarity of their comments. At this time, I will ask the clerk to call the roll so we can verify the presence of a quorum.
Councilmember Rainville.
Present.
Cashman.
Present.
Jenkins is absent. Chowdhury.
Present.
Chair Ellison.
Here.
There are 4 members present.
Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. Today's agenda is before us. Items 5 through 12 are the consent agenda. Item number 5 is 6 liquor license approvals. 6 is 24 liquor license renewals. 7 is 34 gambling license renewals. 8 is approving business license operating conditions for Mrs. Dessert and Coupier. 9 is approving an application for a restaurant and catering license with business license operating conditions for Ryan Food Emporium. 10 is approving a Housing First and Homelessness Prevention Strategies staff direction. 11 is a legislative directive related to transportation network companies, license fees. 12 is a rezoning and alley vacation for Northside Economic Opportunity Network at West Broadway. I would like to, would anyone like to pull these items for question? I see Councilmember Rainville.
Thank you, Chair Ellison. I'd like to pull number 8 I have some questions, please.
All right, Councilmember Rainville is pulling item number 8 for discussion. Anyone else? All right, seeing no one else, I will move the consent agenda for approval. All those in favor, minus the item that's been removed for discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. And those items are approved. Returning to item number 8, Councilmember Rainville.
Thank you, Chair. I'm wondering if some of the staff could help me here. I know this location had a big multiple shot shooting incident, and wondering because they were illegally open, I'm just wondering what these conditions are.
Absolutely, Chair Ellison, Councilmember Rainville. Yes, this location did have an incident in April. They were opening late without approval. They did not have either a permanent or a temporary extended hours license. We proceeded with our progressive enforcement action and issued several citations, as well as met with the police and with that officer, and the owner. And so in resolving that situation, we issued citations, we took it to an administrative law judge, and we came to an agreement with the operator, and we issued some conditions that he assigned in order to continue operating that establishment. And the conditions that we have are that the licensee shall ensure that there is no outside queue lines or congregating other than service at a licensed sidewalk cafe that is present outside the establishment. The establishment shall ensure no customers are present inside the establishment beyond the hours of approved operation, which is Sunday through Thursday, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., Friday through Saturday, 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. The licensee agrees to submit any temporary extended hours applications complete with the signed security plan signed by the 2nd Police Precinct, a minimum of 30 days in advance to the requested time period. We felt that if they can behold to those conditions, that they will be able to operate the business in an appropriate manner, because the only concerns that we had was when they were open too late without approval or a security plan.
So thank you for that, and I'll be very happy to go. The businesses surrounding it are very concerned because of the amount of bullets that were put into their buildings, and people who live there had bullets shot into their buildings. Luckily, no one was hurt, but we just we can't accept that. So I appreciate all your help, Ms. Lingo.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we got a chance to talk about this in agenda setting a little bit, and it sounds like Yeah, sounds like staff really did their due diligence, so thank you for that. I'm going to go ahead and move item number 8. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. And that item passes. Next, we have 3 public hearings. The first is an application for Ava for on-sale liquor, general entertainment with Sunday sales, and 2 a.m. license. This item was continued from our previous meeting, and the public hearing is still open. So at this time, I'll ask if there's anyone here who would like to speak to this matter. Anyone who would like to speak on this item? This item was continued from the last meeting. And all right, I will close the public hearing. And I know that Councilmember Rainville, I believe you had asked to have this item continued so that you could meet with the applicant about some concerns, some neighborhood concerns, and just wanted to offer you the floor to make any comments or make a motion as you see fit.
Thank you, Chair Ellison. I've had a chance to talk to the ownership, and we've kind of started off on a new foot. There was some misinformation initially, but I'm happy to move approval of this, reassuring the neighbors that there will be accountability for this operation. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. And thank you for meeting with your neighbors and having conversations with the business. And so that item is moved for approval. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. All right, and that item is approved. Public hearing number 2. Our next item is a public hearing for an interim use permit to allow a minor auto repair use for the property located at 3452 Lindale Avenue South, subject to conditions. I'll ask Alex Kohlhaas from CPED to give us a presentation.
Thank you, Chair Ellison, members of the committee. This item is a request for an interim use permit for temporary establishment of a minor auto repair use at 3452 Lindale Avenue South. The applicant in this case is the property owner, Manachahir Doosty, and this item is related to a previous application for a certificate of nonconforming use for major auto repair, which came through a month or 2 ago. This is a separate application. It's a slightly different use, which I'll talk about in a minute, but just wanted to call that out. Here's a site plan just showing the existing conditions of the subject property and nearby properties. It's a corner lot at the intersection of Lindale Avenue South and 35th Street West. The bulk of the subject property is it's a 1-story building which has historically been used for various auto repair uses since at least 1963. And as recently as 2021, and that has included some major auto repair uses established for a lot of that time. The service bays for the auto repair use are on the south side of the building, accessed directly from 35th Street. And I'll also note the neighboring property to the north, the 3450. It is a separate parcel, but it is under common ownership with the subject property. That is a 1-story restaurant property. You have some floor plans showing the existing interior layout. You can see the 5 service bays accessed from 35th Street. My understanding is there are no substantial changes to the interior or exterior of the property proposed with this interim use permit application. So just to provide a little bit of zoning code background, you don't need to go through all of this. You may be familiar with all of this already, but just a quick refresher. For zoning purposes, we separate auto repair uses into 2 specific uses, major and minor. The minor auto repair is really focused on kind of the less intensive, very common repair services like oil changes, tire rotation, repairing brakes and engines, etc. Minor auto repair does not allow some more intensive services such as painting or repairing frames or bending metal, so to speak. Those more intense activities not allowed for minor auto repair. Major auto repair is that other category which does allow all the same things as minor, but also allows us more intensive repair services. The subject property and the neighboring property are both in the CM2 zoning district, and these 2 auto repair uses, major and minor, are both within the automobile services use category. And you can see I just copied a part of the use table from the zoning code. Automobile services generally, including minor in this case, can be allowed as a conditional use in that CM2 district. in addition to our downtown and production zoning districts, but major auto repair is called out separately as not allowed at all in the CM2 district. It can only be allowed as a conditional use in that PR2 zoning district. So when it comes to interim uses, this is a separate process that is arranged for in the zoning code for the city to consider temporary uses of land, and is subject to specific findings as articulated in the code, and I'll just go through this briefly. The first required finding for an interim use permit is that the proposed use be authorized as a conditional use in the zoning district it's located in. I just mentioned that is satisfied in this case. The second finding is, except as otherwise authorized, the interim use will conform to the zoning ordinance as if it were established as a conditional use. I'll come back to that topic on the next slide. The third required finding is that the applicants, or for the use, there must be identified a specific date or event when the interim use would terminate, and it cannot be more than 5 years. In this case, the applicants have requested that, if approved, this interim use terminate either after 2 years or upon successful application of other land use applications which would be required for permanent establishment. That would be that conditional use permit. They would also need site plan review, and I think we've identified at least one variance which would be required. That would be a separate application process which would come after the interim use permit if approved. I'll also just note for interim uses, we do have to consider all of the standard findings required for conditional use permits. I'm not going to go through those in detail right now, but I'll just note that staff found all of those CUP findings would be satisfied for the purposes of this IUP application. They would need to be considered separately through any actual conditional use permit, which may come in the future. So with that second finding that talks about complying with other zoning code requirements, in this case, all automobile services are subject to specific use standards in the zoning code. This doesn't just apply for auto repair, but other uses in this category like gas stations or auto sales can come into play for these. But I've highlighted the ones which are either definitely relevant or potentially relevant for something like an auto repair use. Some of these just govern the ongoing operations of the use, but that first one in particular, it calls out a minimum lot area requirement of 14,000 square feet for automobile sales or automobile service uses, including minor auto repair. In this case, the subject property is just under 5,000 square feet in area, so it's well below that 14,000 square foot minimum. For interim use permits, the zoning code does authorize the city council to waive conditions which would otherwise apply to an interim use permit as described in the ordinance. For the purposes of this IUP, staff does recommend that the council waive this minimum lot area requirement, again, specific to the IUP. The kind of background for staff's consideration is just the history of this property being designed and operated for auto repair services for more than 50 years and as recently as 3 years ago. And the waiver of the minimum lot area requirement for the interim use would facilitate operation of that use, again, on a temporary basis for up to 2 years as requested by the applicant, while they pursue permanent establishment through those other land use applications I mentioned. And as a part of their applications for permanent establishment, they would need to separately satisfy that lot area requirement. That's not something that could be waived as part of that process, but could potentially be requested under a variance application, for example. So in conclusion, staff does recommend approval of this interim use permit application, including that waiver of the minimum lot area that I just described. And we do recommend a few conditions of approval, which are listed in the staff report. And there were a total of 2 public comments received that came in just over the last day or two. They should have been forwarded along separately for your consideration. I believe the applicant's representative is in attendance during today's hearing. This concludes my presentation, but I'll stand for questions.
Thank you for the presentation, and I'll see if there are any questions from colleagues. Not seeing any. So I will go ahead, thank you. I will go ahead and open the public hearing. And I see Salim is here listed. Yes. You all right, man?
I twisted my ankle.
Oh, man.
That's what happens when you push 30 and you try to play organized sports still. Good afternoon. My name is Keon Dusti. I'm an attorney. I'm representing my father on this matter. I'm with Salim. He'll be the one running the business. Everything Alex said, we're in agreement with. We appreciate the city for their work and the council for coming to this resolution. I think we're in a good space now to get the business up and operating under the correct conditions and zoning requirements, and we look forward in the coming months to appear in front of you again and continue to work, Alex and everyone else. So we're just grateful that we've come to this spot and we've been able to figure it out. And I'll stand for any questions.
All right. Thank you. No,
Yeah.
I think we're good on questions. Appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate it.
All right. So I will go ahead and close the public hearing, and I will call on Councilmember Cashman.
Thank you. Chair Ellison, just wanted to thank staff and you for finding a solution to help this business operate legally, and I think this is a great solution. So I'll move this item for approval today.
Great. Thank you. The item is moved for approval. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. All right, and that item passes. All right, let me make sure I got it. Our next item is a public hearing for an ordinance adding provisions related to mandatory disclosure for renters' rights information. And so I'll ask Josie Shardlow from Regulatory Services to give us a presentation. Welcome.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chair Ellison, members of the committee. I'm Josie Shardlow, Director of Operations and Engagement for Regulatory Services, and I'm presenting on the Renters' Rights Mandatory Disclosure Ordinance today. This next slide has just a brief overview of today's presentation. Essentially, I'll talk through the renter notices that are already required, share about the components of this proposed change, and then share about implementation plans and enforcement. The idea behind disclosures or notice requirements broadly are that they provide renters with information to make the best housing decisions for themselves and their families. There are already some rental information disclosures that the city currently requires and enforces. This proposed mandatory disclosure incorporates information from current disclosures and adds property condition information. So this is information that the city already collects, and it is available as public data. By having rental property owners share it proactively, it increases that transparency. So looking at this little wheel image on the slide, rental property owners are currently required to display the rental license certificate and the who to call poster, and inspectors check for these when they do inspections. And then the other three elements on the little image are advance notice of sale, the renter energy disclosure, and the pre-eviction filing notice. So these require complaint-based enforcement, and that will be the same with this additional disclosure that's being proposed today. So getting into the ordinance itself, there are three main components. The first is requirement for rental property owners to provide the following information before residents sign the lease. So those are the identity and contact information of the property owner. An identity means the legal owner. That could be an entity like a trust or an LLC. The rental license tier status of the property, which is included in the rental license already. A list of violations of the housing code that contributed to the tier status of the property. And we've got a proposed small tweak to that language. I'll get to that. A copy of all unabated orders and violation tags affecting the dwelling unit or the common areas. And then finally, other information the Director of Regulatory Services may deem necessary. The second part is a provision related to the disclosures, again, before signing the lease. So this ordinance allows for any renter who did not receive the mandatory disclosures before signing the lease to terminate their lease after 30 days notice to the property owner. And then finally, these are the requirements that rental property owners would provide after signing the lease. So the three things are information on the rights protected by federal law, state law, and city ordinance, contact information for the Department of Regulatory Services, and that piece again around other information that the director deems necessary. These are some likely amendments that are still being finalized. Just wanted a preview for transparency. The first is to make an effective date of March 1st, 2025, which is when rental license renewals are due. So this way we can make sure to do an education campaign ahead of that date. It'll give us time to pull together the necessary tools and information for the property owners. And next, adding the requirement of providing the identity and contact information of the operator in addition to the owner is a potential amendment. This aligns with the rental license, which already requires that a natural person be listed. Finally, replacing the word list with a more general term would give us flexibility in how this information is shared. For instance, it could be something like the link to a dashboard versus like a literal list. Again, these are draft amendments at this point. The language is still being finalized. For implementation, in regulatory services, our aim is always to educate and equip people to be in compliance first. So staff would do an education campaign to let all stakeholders know about this ordinance change. Leading up to the rental license renewal period, we would ensure property owners and property managers were aware of it with, email messages, a mailing, updating the website, social media, things of that nature. We would also aim to partner with city staff, council, and community-based organizations so that residents were well aware as well. In addition, we'd provide the necessary tools to rental property owners and managers. So one is access to a dashboard with all of their violations, if they have any. This currently exists for violations that regulatory services enforces, but would require us to create an expanded dashboard to include those enforced by other departments. We'd also create a disclosure template with the information they would need to provide to be in compliance, basically just thinking about all the tools to make it easy to be in compliance with this. We have had some questions come through on the public comment and from the Housing Advisory Committee where we presented on the details of implementation. And what I can share is the department will be finalizing the details and that information will be communicated as part of the education period. And it's been really helpful to get the feedback from community as we think through that. I'll mention at this point, too, there were some questions and concerns about the provision that the Director of Regulatory Services can add additional requirements. As I understand it, this is pretty standard with this type of language. It does allow for updates to keep current with the city's ever-changing context. And if in the future the director did need to add additional information to the disclosures, there'd be an additional education period where this would be communicated broadly before any enforcement begins. Typically, that education period is 6 months and would include multiple modes of education again. And then as for enforcement, once again, our aim in regulatory services is always for voluntary compliance. So we focus heavily on the education piece, giving people the tools, but there is an enforcement component when needed. Enforcement would be complaint-based and handled by the alternative enforcement team in regulatory services. It would follow the standard process that includes the steps detailed here. Once a complaint is received, staff investigates. If a violation is confirmed, we send an order to correct notice to the property owner, and if the owner does not provide the disclosures within the timeline outlined, then that $250 citation would be issued. We did get quite a bit of public comment on this, nearly 80 comments. There were some in support of the ordinance. There were more comments with concerns or questions. Some of these concerns were around sharing the owner's identity and the director's ability to add requirements later. In addition, some of the commenters shared they thought this was redundant with what's already required or overly burdensome for rental property owners. So I just want to acknowledge that feedback that we got. In addition, some requested tools to make it easier for them to comply. So hope you'll see I tried to address those in my remarks today. And at this point, this concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you. I'm going to thank you for the presentation. I'm going to see if there are any questions from colleagues before we open the public hearing. All right, not seeing any questions from colleagues, and so thank you so much for the presentation. I am going to now open the public hearing. And I've got a list of names in front of me, but if we exhaust this list and there are folks who didn't hear their name called, or if you didn't sign up with the clerks, you can still do so, and I'll add additional names. At the end, I'll see if there are any other, when I get to the end of my list, I'll see if there's anyone else that wants to give testimony, and you can just come up to the podium, give your name, and then give your testimony. So first on my list here, I have Amy Bennett. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, all. I will ask that you all will look up at me while I'm speaking. I know I've testified here previously, and what I have to say to you is of such importance. I need to make sure that you are all paying attention. I'm a 45-year-old white woman with a 4-year-old daughter at home. I have been threatened by tenants for the last 11 years. I'm the owner of naturally occurring affordable housing in North Minneapolis, properties that all of you are trying to keep from going vacant. I am an owner that you want in this city. I am personally there and making sure that my properties are in good condition. However, my physical safety has been threatened numerous times over the last 11 years, and we all know that the safety in our city continues to become an issue. If I were threatened by a domestic partner the way I have been threatened by tenants, I would be eligible for Safe at Home. And so I ask each of you, will you be providing Safe at Home for every person who is now putting our safety on the line? Will you be providing a police officer who will follow me to daycare every day as I drop my daughter off, because they can find me and following me to the next place is not difficult? I went into this business because I cared so much about providing good quality housing. I'm not putting in granite countertops, but I am putting in nice, affordable places for people to live. The decision that you make here will affect my life on a day-to-day basis. The safety. Show me a CEO whose home I can find, whose telephone number I can find. I have no problem being contacted as an owner. I have been contacted by tenants numerous times, but there are legal reasons why tenants get disgruntled. I understand I'm near done, however, when they have legitimate damage to my property, which I can tell you over 8 units from my personal funds, $106,000 worth of damage occurred last year, in part from tenants I could not screen out due to these ordinances.
Let's try to wrap.
I do understand. This is a safety issue. You can be contacted, but my personal information is personal. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have Tyler Perrette. Correct me if I got that wrong.
You nailed it, Chair. Thank you.
There you go.
Afternoon, Council. Thank you for allowing me to be here today. My name is Tyler Perrette. I'm the Chief Policy and Partnerships Officer for Aon. We're an affordable housing provider that's been active in the Twin Cities for almost 40 years now. We are committed to creating and sustaining quality, affordable homes that strengthen lives and communities. We currently support 1,902, give or take, apartment homes in Minneapolis spread across multiple city council districts. I'm speaking today against the mandatory disclosure ordinance. Over the past couple of years, the state of Minnesota has made historic investment in an effort to preserve affordable housing. But I want to be clear, the state's investment of the past several years will not be sufficient to save all of the affordable housing we have in our community. We will lose affordable housing over the next couple of years. The question before all of us is, how much affordable housing are we going to lose? Resolutions like this that add administrative burden to an already encumbered system will exacerbate the problem over time. Many of us in the affordable housing system that are committed to the mission of providing homes for everyone in our community and striving for ways to increase efficiency, increase quality, and increase the efficacy of our affordable housing systems and structures. This is ultimately a benefit to every resident who lives in an affordable housing community. This resolution certainly does not help that effort, and in many cases will prompt site staff to take their eye off the ball of the real work of affordable housing to focus on an additional administrative burden that distracts them from doing their job of actually moving people into vacant units, responding to maintenance requests, or ensuring compliance with the litany of regulations at the state and federal level. Ultimately, much of the information required in this ordinance is already available to anybody who wants it. Instead of solving many of the real issues facing our affordable housing system, this resolution is a solution in search of a problem. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Joe Hessler.
Thank you, Chair Ellison and committee members. I'm here to speak enthusiastically for this ordinance that does common sense things, gives tenants a chance to review a landlord's history before signing a lease, and gives them the right to terminate a lease if they were not given that basic information when they made the decision to sign the lease. I don't know what argument a lobbyist or a landlord would have to make here today against such a fair and common sense ordinance. It would have to be something like, we have the right to keep our violations secret and hard to find out. We have the right to keep prospective tenants in the dark and unaware of their rights. Further, they would have to say a tenant should not have the right to terminate a lease to report a violation that they were not told about when they signed their lease. That's just not fair. It's not common sense, and it's not a level playing field. A landlord can look up your credit history. They can talk to previous landlords and find out how you acted. This gives you a chance to know about them, which you should have to know, and gives you a chance to break the lease if you weren't told that. And I think it's fair to good landlords, so I don't see why a good landlord would think a bad landlord should be able to hide their violations. That's your competition. And this would benefit good landlords, and I think it's just a no-brainer, and I think this will pass. I sure hope so. Please vote for it.
Thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Cecil Smith.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair. My name is Cecil Smith. I'm President and CEO of the Minnesota Multi-Housing Association. MHA is an industry nonprofit representing 2,200 members who own and operate 310,000 rental units, serving 600,000 residents across Minnesota, many of which live in Minneapolis. I'm here today to ask for careful reconsideration of the proposed ordinance. MHA strongly believes in market transparency, and that is the goal of this ordinance. Therefore, we're aligned on the objective, but there are practical considerations and many concerns that we have with the ordinance. Our first major concern rests with the data that we're being asked to provide. For housing providers to comply, we need an accurate and determinative repository of the information set out in this ordinance. We do not believe that currently exists, and certainly not in a form that is readily accessible to housing providers and renters. If we're being asked to administer this data, then that is another cost you're asking the industry and renters to bear. All of these costs have an impact on housing affordability. Further, the ordinance doesn't address any time periods regarding violations or at what time during the lease this provision is no longer relevant. Currently, it's open-ended. We recommend the policy set out clear timing. Second, the consequence for violating these disclosures is completely disproportionate. Terminating a renter's lease is a serious matter. When a renter terminates, that is equally a serious matter with significant costs. We recommend that the punishment be proportional and that fines would escalate for chronic violators. Again, we believe competitive markets work best for all participants when there's transparency, clarity, and fairness. MHA is ready to assist in achieving that goal with this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. And last on my list, but there will be opportunity for more, is Daniel Suter.
Hello, my name is Daniel Suter. I'm a housing attorney for Homeline, a tenants' rights organization that's been serving Minnesotan tenants for 30 years. What I hear today is a lot of landlords trying to escape accountability. It's not always possible to tour a unit these days before you rent it. So many people are moving to Minnesota in an effort to escape restrictions on reproductive freedom, to escape transphobia, to make a better home for their families because of our economic opportunity. And when you're moving to Minneapolis, you don't always have a chance to tour an apartment. Some people can't afford lengthy hotel stays to stay and wait for a lease to begin. And the kind of bait and switch we see every day would be solved by this law. It is so easy to throw a coat of paint over a ton of mold. It is so easy to hide electrical problems. How does a tenant know if there's a problem with the electricity or the water before they live in an apartment? All we're asking is that landlords disclose. If they're so afraid of tenants knowing what's going on with their properties, I think that raises a larger question. And nothing in this law requires a landlord to disclose their home address to a tenant. It requires contact information. You can have a business. You can have an office. There are plenty of ways to not disclose your home address. LLCs don't have a home address. And so this is a very measured law. And terminating a lease is the option for tenants. Because with a bait and switch like this, the tenant did not make an informed decision to sign the lease. Would you rent a place with the walls full of mold? No. But it's so hard to break a lease in Minnesota. Incredibly difficult. You have to enroll in, I've had people consider enrolling in the Army or signing up for active duty to break a lease, because that's one of the only ways you can do it. So we're just asking that tenants have the right to get a mulligan, to get a do-over if their landlord lies to them. Thank you very much, and I hope you'll support this law.
Thank you for your testimony. That is the end of the list that I have. Is there anyone else who would like to testify to this ordinance? Anyone else? Come forward.
My name is Tim Swarzak. I own a few rental properties in Minneapolis, small time. These are unprepared remarks, but I have two examples that would be difficult to comply. And so my recommendation is that you really think about how someone would comply, not so much complaining about any one thing, but first, we have all Tier 1 rental properties except for one that we acquired that was Tier 2. There's no reset, it's just a Tier 2. I have no idea why it's a Tier 2. I would have no way to comply with this law in that case. There needs to be a better system for that. Secondly, the language about state and local rights is just too vague, or too open-ended, too vague. There would be no, how am I supposed to list everything, every state and local law that affects a renter, every right they have? I mean, I do mortgages for a living, and I can tell you that's extensive. It would take a legal background, so you're really going to need to provide something and have it be a defined list and not an open-ended list. There's zero way that someone could comply without a legal background, and the cost to comply to that and likelihood of compliance would be very low. That's all I have to say.
Thank you for your testimony. All right, I'll offer one more time. And then clerks, did we get an adequate name for that testifier? Great. Oh, and then I also want to recognize that we've been joined by Councilmember Jenkins a while ago, but I didn't recognize it earlier. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to close the public hearing, and thank you all for your testimony. Really important feedback for the author, for the committee to consider. We've gotten a ton of written testimony as well, and there are amendments under consideration. And so the authors are looking to talk more with staff, with our colleagues, about some of the amendments to address some of the issues that I think have come up. We do think that this fills a need, fills a real problem. So I don't think it's a solution in search of a problem. It's very real that every single one of us, I don't want to speak for my colleagues, but I know that I certainly hear from tenants who have no way of getting in contact with the people that are supposed to be offering their housing. And we also see that even the Attorney General's office has put together a team to address folks who are having their consumer protections violated through their housing, and that's pretty unprecedented for the state to be taking those steps. And some people might think that I'm telling the state to do that, or others of us are telling the state to do that, but we're not, right? We're recognizing that renters are consumers. Their rights are often violated. If these are not things that apply to some of the folks in this room, then that's great. But these are real issues that folks face out in the community at much higher rates than maybe we would want to have to experience or admit. And so I think that this ordinance is necessary. It's looking for a solution to a problem. But with that being said, I do think that there are further amendments to be made. And so I'm going to continue this item one cycle to the next meeting of August 6, 2024, and see if there's any discussion on that. Councilmember Rainville?
Thank you, Chair. I just want the public to know, especially the young lady who testified about her personal safety, that I hear you loud and clear. I do share that as well. I've been subject to, thank you. So, I'm sorry, security, could you ask that person to? Okay. Anyway, I'll cut my remarks short, but I heard you. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Jenkins?
Thank you, Chair Ellison. I do appreciate the extension of this ordinance to the next council meeting. I think there is a serious need to reconsider and think about some of the amendments that are coming forward. I want to be careful that we are not placing more financial burdens on our tenants to make housing less affordable. And so I want to see how we can get to some solutions. I'm curious, has there been any collaboration with property owners and landlords around the development of this ordinance?
Like with all ordinances, I think there's been stakeholder engagement. Obviously, there's this process, but there has been a significant amount of feedback, and so I think that's what the cause for the delay of a cycle, so that we can further consider those things.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Chowdhury.
Thank you, Chair Ellison. I really appreciate it. I support us continuing this so we can have further discussions with staff. I definitely have some questions coming up in regards to this ordinance and the details of it. However, I do think that there is a need for this ordinance when it comes to supporting renters that are oftentimes navigating really difficult terrain in our city and finding a good place to live in. I hope in this committee we can work together to find agreement so we can pass an ordinance that helps get this type of disclosure for renters. I'll name for myself, I'm hoping we can hear from more renters in our community. And as a renter who has had different rental experiences, I'll just share a story of a time when I did not have a lot of money and I was living in an apartment with 2 other women. It was a beautiful apartment that we really loved living in. It was a brownstone in Minneapolis, and it was pretty affordable between the 3 of us. And there was one day where it was really good, and then there was one day where it became really bad, where we were dealing with multiple issues around repairs not being done, leak from a pipe that was going from the bedroom in my ceiling down to the floor, and then a rapidly growing mice infestation. And we were left to our own devices to figure out how we were going to get out of the situation. We had to talk to our other neighbors. We reached out to our council member. We reached out to tenants' rights organizations to just navigate this situation, and spent a lot of time and effort, and we could not get in contact with the right person to address the situation. And we had to do a deep dive search in order to find cell phone numbers and reach the actual property owner versus the property management company who was just not supporting us and not validating the concerns that we were experiencing. And through all of that effort, we had to convince this person to let us break our lease and not have to pay multiple thousands of dollars in order to leave an unsafe living situation. And because he was a nice person, we were able to make that difference. And he ended up letting go of that property management company for the future. But that was a very difficult situation. And should we have had the tools necessary to understand the rental situation we were living in, we may have made different choices in where we were living, or may have been able to get more support when we were really struggling. And I was housing insecure because of that situation. I was couch surfing, living between places, and I didn't have a secure place to stay. I'm lucky I'm not in that position anymore, but I know that there's many renters in the city of Minneapolis, particularly young people, working people, black and brown people, indigenous people, queer people, who are struggling with that right now. And we're a renter majority city with very little in comparison in terms of supports and tools to make it easier to navigate a rental system, build wealth, achieve other economic goals, whether it's home ownership or something else. So I think this is an ordinance that deserves serious consideration, and I look forward to working with all of you here to bring forward amendments and have a good discussion the next biz committee, because I do think we should work on passing something, and I do believe is it within our values to do so.
Thank you. Councilmember Cashman.
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering if the Director Velasquez or Ms. Shardlow, maybe I'll ask you, Director, and, if need be, Ms. Shardlow could maybe answer a couple of questions about this. So I was wondering about, number 8 in the proposal. It does say, in a manner approved by the Director of Regulatory Services. So can you describe, what the rental property info disclosure process would look like from your perspective? The text is not here.
Chair Ellison, Councilmember Cashman. Yeah, so we're still working on defining what that process would look like in terms of the disclosures. We certainly are aware that there are amendments that are planned to come forward and didn't want to prematurely present anything that would obfuscate that possibility. But essentially, we will work with Housing Advisory Committee and others to develop what those tools look like in order to make sure that they're aware of what those different disclosures are and different resources available, so that they're able to communicate what the ask is in terms of the disclosures that need to go forward to all the different renters within their properties.
Okay. And then, as some folks said today, and this is certainly, I think, true for the most part, that much of the information, the owner's name or legal identity is available on the dashboard, as well as which tier a property is in is available on the dashboard, but folks have to know where to go to find that. Most people don't go to this dashboard and look up their property, their owner, etc. But can you comment on the ways that you're making this information available via the dashboard, and any limitations about the accuracy of the dashboard and how often it's updated, and how certain someone can be that what they're seeing on the dashboard is up to date?
Certainly. Chair Ellison, Councilmember Cashman, the dashboard is reviewed and updated in terms of the tier on an annual basis, with a 2-year look back in terms of what violations have occurred and what are some of the different conditions that led to that specific tiering. It is publicly available. One of the elements that we have spoken about, at least internally, is making sure that within the disclosure that we'll prepare in the different resources is access, to make sure that others are aware of the dashboard and the access to it, as well as updating our language access template, so that anybody who requires some additional assistance in terms of interpreting the information, or if they need the information in a different language, that we are as responsive to that and make sure that we're reaching people where they are so that they can access that information.
Okay. So are you planning on doing kind of like a reform to this dashboard as a part of this process if this ordinance passes? Or, does regulatory services need more resources in order to fulfill this? How is that situation looking right now?
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Ellison, Chair Ellison, Councilmember Cashman. At this point, we do not anticipate a need for additional resources. We take advantage of neighborhood and community relations, language access lines, and other resources to be able to have the information interpreted or translated into additional languages so that people get access to the information that they're specifically looking for without translating the entirety of the dashboard every single year to multiple languages.
Mm-hmm. And then I did hear that the proposal is to have this ordinance go into effect in March. That would be an amendment here. Would that be appropriate timing in terms of when the tiers are updated on the dashboard? Does that kind of mesh well with the same timing that the information would become accurate and up to date?
Yes, so the rental tiers are reviewed on an annual basis in the end of October to early December timeframe. And that's so that we are able to review the data, make any final corrections, and then start the rental license renewal process in the following January. March is when the rental license is typically renewed, so the timing would be correct.
Okay, thanks. That's really helpful. And then I think last question I wanted to ask for you. So I think the penalty here for noncompliance is that renters would be able to get out of their lease if they were not given the disclosures in advance. And of course, a landlord could have the renter sign a disclosure form like, I agree that I did see this disclosure form. I think that's pretty standard. So this is an incentive for property owners to be forthright about the conditions of their property. And so I don't think that the lease termination clause would be utilized frequently if all goes according to plan. But can you share from your perspective what you expect the impact of these changes would be in terms of either the quality of rental property stock in the city or the tenant experience?
Certainly. Chair Ellison, Councilmember Cashman, what we anticipate is just as you described, that we should not see a high rate of individuals that are looking to terminate their lease because of an administrative situation where they didn't receive the disclosure. If the rental property is in good quality, it's safe, it's livable, the environment is in a good condition, then there really should be no reason to break the lease. Now, if there are some other extenuating circumstances where that renter was not aware that there have been multiple mold violations, as an example, since that was used earlier, and there are individuals living within that household who are severely asthmatic or severely responsive to the conditions within that unit, having that disclosure would have helped them make a more informed decision of, do I choose apartment A or apartment B? Am I staying within this complex, or do I go to this other one that I'm also have access to and would be able to move into? So I would see this as a fairly low risk situation.
Okay, well, those are the questions that I have for now, and look forward to continuing this discussion next cycle.
Thank you. On the motion to continue, Councilmember Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair Ellison. I just had another question for Mr. Velasquez. Can you help us understand what disclosures are currently in place now for landlords to help tenants understand the property?
Certainly. Thank you, Chair Ellison, Councilmember Jenkins, Director. Thank you.
Chair Ellison, Councilmember Jenkins. It's the rental license itself, which has to be posted on the property. So that includes the tier, the rental address, the unit's license, the last rental inspection date, the rental property contact name and address. That has to be the natural person. The expiration date. It includes information for renters on 311 and when to call about repairs, legal assistance, resource info. These are all things that are on the rental license. That has to be posted in that common area, it stipulates. So that's one. And then the who to call poster, which has information for 311, Regulatory Services, Housing Liaison Team, Department of Civil Rights, Homeline, Legal Aid, Housing Link. So that's what's currently the current disclosures. And then the advance notice of sale, pre-eviction filing notice, renter energy disclosure, those are the other three.
Thank you.
Any other?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, so on the motion to continue this to the next regular meeting, August 6th, I believe, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. All right, and that item is continued. Great. Our next item is a quasi-judicial hearing for a variance and site plan review appeal for 2941 26th Avenue South. This item was continued from our July 9th Biz Committee meeting due to a lack of time, and now the applicant has requested that their application be withdrawn. So since the public hearing is still open from July 9th, I will see if anyone's here to speak. I'll see if staff has any comment to give.
Councilmember Ellison, no additional comments. I'm just here if there are questions. But yes, the application has been withdrawn by the applicant.
All right. I have to see if anyone's here to speak because those are our rules. But it would be pretty strange if anyone was here to speak. All right, great. It seems like no one's here to speak. So I will go ahead and close the public hearing, and I will move to withdraw this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. And that motion carries. Very excited to not have another lengthy quasi-judicial discussion. All right, our next item is a report on a landscape analysis of safe outdoor spaces. This is a response to a staff direction authored by council members Chavez, Chowdhury, and Chugtai. Nice little alliteration going there. I'll ask Sarah Renner from the City Auditor's Office to give us a presentation. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Ellison, council members. My name is Sarah Renner. I'm here to present on safe outdoor spaces for people experiencing homelessness. On May 14th, this committee directed the Policy and Research Division to 1, conduct a landscape analysis of municipalities with safe outdoor spaces for people experiencing homelessness, and 2, identify a range of changes that might be necessary to enable safe outdoor spaces here in Minneapolis. This report and presentation responds to the first directive only. I am presenting the findings of our landscape analysis in order to start the discussion, get feedback from council members in order to inform part 2, which will focus exclusively on what has been done and what could be done here in Minneapolis. The report process. To conduct the landscape analysis, I undertook extensive desk research and conducted interviews with 7 cities and 8 different spaces. As you can see, there are an array of safe outdoor spaces in cities across the country, and disproportionately, they're located in the West Coast. I selected cities that had safe outdoor spaces in places for a longer period of time, such as Seattle and Portland, or cities with similar climates, such as Duluth and Madison, Wisconsin. So this is a range of safe outdoor, this is a range of shelter spaces, so to give you perspective. In fact, this is, I pulled this from a study described by, done in Oakland, and they used safe outdoor spaces in the same way that we're using this in the report, which is as an umbrella term. And as an umbrella term, it refers to spaces that are composed of portable structures, shelter structures, outdoor tents, trailers, tiny homes, safe and safe parking lots. And those are spaces which allow those living in their vehicles to park overnight. And so as opposed to Minneapolis's Avivo Village, which is the closest comparison, these spaces have no walls, essentially. And this is a picture of a space in Madison, Wisconsin, which they refer to as Mission Camp. All of the safe outdoor spaces that I researched for this report are envisioned as a part of an interim solution, which are designed to meet the needs of the unhoused in the short term while the city invests in permanent solutions. So the cities with safe outdoor spaces, they report taking a housing first approach, whereby the goal is not shelter but permanent housing. However, with the affordable housing and addiction crises, the end of the eviction moratorium, they recognize the need for additional interim transitory spaces where cities, while the cities work on developing low-income housing, transitional housing, addiction treatments, and other safe use spaces and other solutions. The safe outdoor space research, the spaces researched for this report all take a low barrier and harm reduction approach. And this means taking in people with, despite their addictions or their criminal background. Sorry, I just lost a slide. And also it means allowing for drug and alcohol use in private spaces on site. And that's similar to Minneapolis's Avivo Village. All the research spaces also aim to meet basic needs while emphasizing rehabilitation and rehousing. They all limit the spaces to adults experiencing homelessness. And finally, they all have coordinated placement. So they have outreach teams that identify potential clients for whom traditional shelter may not be an option. And that might be because they are unwilling to separate from a partner, because they have addictions or other conditions. So what is the rationale for having a safe outdoor space as opposed to a traditional shelter? Advocates and operators, including those interviewed for this report, suggest that the safe outdoor spaces allow for basic and rehabilitative needs to be met more efficiently, reducing the costs of policing and medical care for the unhoused. When people are in a predictable, secure space, not on the street or in an encampment, outreach and service provisions more effective, as well as serious incidents, deaths, medical conditions can be prevented. It's further suggested that safe outdoor spaces meet the needs of unhoused persons for whom congregate shelter, again, is not an option. A portion of the unhoused avoid traditional shelters, including here in Minneapolis, as reported by Hennepin, including because they have PTSD or trauma responses to congregate spaces. They seek security for their belongings. They have addictions. They seek to avoid rules that exclude those with criminal records or separate couples of different sexes. In interviews for this report, several cities mentioned that people experiencing homelessness were willing to move into safe outdoor spaces even after turning down other types of shelter options. And all spaces interviewed, except Duluth, reported being at capacity with wait lists for potential clients. Those interviews suggested that safe outdoor spaces allow people more stability and autonomy than traditional shelter. That might be because the site operators are actually offering clients a greater say in decision-making, but it can also be in part the result of clients simply having their own private space that they can lock, giving them the ability to come and go as they please. And because of the private space and the peer support, interviewees also suggested that the safe outdoor spaces are more conducive to a harm reduction approach, whereby people with addictions can use in private settings and eventually receive treatment. Finally, those that operate the safe parking spaces explained that they are a little bit different. They actually operate as a early intervention model, meaning that they can help to prevent people who are living in their vehicles from sliding further into homelessness. Those living in their cars are more likely to be recently unhoused and also to have a source of income. Cautions and limitations. Several cautions and limitations to safe outdoor spaces were pointed out as important. Guidance from the University of Seattle, for example, stressed that safe outdoor spaces are not a solution to homelessness and should not be oversold as such, as some cities have. And they warn against implementing safe outdoor spaces while at the same time criminalizing public camping or taking a harder line on encampments. Some cities have paired the two. They point out that space limitations and requirements exclude people from the safe outdoor spaces just as they do from indoor shelters. And all safe outdoor spaces researched for this report they did screen and keep out people with a history of sexual offenses or certain kinds of felonies or those not able to live independently. Although safe outdoor spaces have proven effective at closing individual encampments, cities with safe outdoor spaces continue to have sometimes rising unsheltered populations and encampments. The U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness issued a caution noting the limitations that I just mentioned of safe outdoor spaces, but they also pointed out they can be costly in terms of money, time, and effort. They cautioned that programs can be difficult to close once opened, and that safe outdoor spaces can be difficult to manage and maintain. And I spoke to a lot of the operators of these spaces. Some of the reoccurring difficulties that they pointed out were the need to balance giving clients the voice and autonomy that they really were seeking, but with the imperative of ensuring a safe space for healing and rehabilitation. And the report lists a lot of the individual challenges there, city by city. Several of the operators also mentioned difficulties working with the police, given the trauma that a lot of the clients have from past interaction with the police. So they had to work out systems and agreements by which they cooperated with the police to enforce codes of conduct and respond to complaints. Challenges and trends. So looking across the safe outdoor spaces again, I'll mention a few of the trends and challenges. All interviewees, except those with safe parking spaces, noted that there was a substantial initial resistance from communities, the communities that neighbor the proposed safe outdoor spaces, including lawsuits. To overcome that initial resistance, cities invested in community outreach and engagement as a part of their regular budget. They also facilitated good neighbor agreements between site operators and neighborhood associations, specifically addressing the neighbors' stated concerns. And Seattle actually mandates by ordinance that such good neighbor agreements be in place, that site operators put them in place. So once in operation, interviewed cities reported that the opposition of neighbors largely waned. In part, this is probably because the anticipated increases in crime did not manifest, or other fears. The cities I interviewed seemed to be increasingly locating safe outdoor spaces on city land, therefore assuming the liability and insurance for the sites themselves. Finally, another trend there was a move away from populating spaces with tents and towards the portable structures or the tiny houses. And Denver explained that one reason for this is that according to HUD guidelines, individuals who are living in their tents or staying in their tents are counted as unsheltered in the annual point in time count. There's also some evidence from Seattle suggesting that rehousing rates may be higher in spaces populated with more stable structures. So all sites researched and interviewed provided for, I'm going through the services and amenities, again, focusing on the commonalities between the sites. They all offer on-site case management and peer support. And through case management, clients are referred to and can access substance abuse treatment and other types of behavioral health services, mental health services, domestic violence services, housing, employment, and benefit navigation. And they varied to what degree those were actually offered on site, but all had, every client had a case manager. And all non-parking sites were staffed 24/7 and included shelters and or sleeping pods with electricity, heating, and usually air conditioning, except for Denver's tent spaces in which they put electric heaters and fans inside the tents. All offered communal bathrooms, showers, laundry, and office spaces, mostly in heated trailers. Sorry. I really messed this up. Sorry. And regular medical care is available in all the sites, and mostly that was through weekly site visits. And all the sites offered 1 to 3 meals daily, and that was usually through donations, food partnerships. So the findings in terms of efficacy, how well do they work? I sought to gauge the efficacy in terms of how well the spaces meet basic and rehabilitative needs, as well as how well do the spaces do in terms of making homeless as brief and non-reoccurring as possible. Most cities and sites collected information on what happened to clients after exiting the safe outdoor spaces, but the metrics varied enough, unfortunately, to make comparison somewhat difficult. Among the 7 safe outdoor spaces providing data, an average of 43% of total clients were placed or transitioned into permanent housing. The actual percentages did vary quite a lot, from like 13% to 70%. All interviewees reported relying on the established criteria to prioritize clients for rehousing. In most cases, they confirmed that the criteria, followed HUD guidelines. Yes, so they essentially prioritize people according to HUD guidelines for the rehousing, meaning that they weren't actually cooking the books. Definitions were too varied and timelines were too short, however, to establish how many clients had been successfully rehoused after the safe outdoor spaces. And people in non-parking spaces typically stayed around 1 year in these spaces, but their length of stay depended on the nature of their rehabilitation. Seattle reported that of the 331 clients exiting its tiny villages last year, less than 2% returned to homelessness. Most did not collect that information. Duluth reported about 85% of those who used its safe parking space last summer engaged in case management. So they were getting closer to rehousing. And then looking at costs. Sorry, I seem to have just created a pile of paper here.
Totally okay. Your time, get reorganized.
The next one's going to be stapled. Sorry. Yes. In terms of costs, safe outdoor spaces have an initial one-time startup cost and as well as an annual operating cost. So the startup costs can vary very significantly. Madison, Wisconsin reported that their initial startup cost and operational costs for the first year was $1.1 million. And that's for a space accommodating around 45 people. The startup costs vary in what they include, but they seem to all include community outreach. They include enabling utilities in the space. Sometimes they include building roads. They include purchasing pallet shelters, which is the portable shelter. In Seattle, actually, the tiny homes are built through donated funds. The startup costs also include the purchase of trailers for restrooms, laundry, showers, office, and common space. The annual operating costs include the cost of contracting a site operator, providing services, allowing for annual maintenance, oversight, and again, community engagement. So roughly, the annual operating costs are between $15,000 and $25,000 a year per client. I broke it down that way so it would be comparable. Some cities reported also purchasing or leasing land, and that significantly increased the costs. They had to do that because of the sites that they ran out of. Locating the actual sites can be somewhat of a challenge. The addition of a building on the site also significantly increased the costs. So the costs you see there are without buildings. And zoning and regulations, finally. All cities I researched with, again, non-parking safe outdoor spaces have ordinances that govern and permit the use of space for their specific type of outdoor space. They all were written to anticipate the risks posed by safe outdoor spaces. Most wrote in operational parameters into the codified permitting requirements. So, for example, Tacoma Municipal Code authorizes the Director of Planning and Development Services to issue permits only upon demonstrating that all public health and safety considerations were adequately addressed. Duluth requires any contracted operator to provide evidence of liability insurance that's acceptable to the city attorney. There are processes for regularly renewing the permits. And Madison, Wisconsin also required any operators to have a state campground license, and they put a limit on the number of shelter units. So there were a whole variety of regulations that cities were putting into these ordinances, and each one of those ordinances is attached to the city in the back of the report, so you can see all the ordinances. I did also try to summarize them. And with that, that's it. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for the presentation, and I will see if any of my colleagues have questions regarding the presentation. And I see Councilmember Cashman.
Thanks, Chair Ellison. Thank you, Sarah. This is a lot of great work. I was shocked to see how many cities had this safe outdoor spaces just across the country, and even as close as Duluth and Madison. Not something that I knew before this. I learned a lot today. I was wondering if you could go back to the cost slide. I thought it was really interesting, the comparative analysis that you did. And in Madison, both the startup costs and the operational costs were $1.1 million for 45 people. Do you know if those were the same 45 people or kind of like a rotating amount of 45 people?
So that's 45 people at any given time. And they tip, I think Madison is a little bit less than a year. They started a few years ago, and they told me they had one person that was still with them from the same original batch of people. But generally, people were staying a little less than a year in Madison, Wisconsin, if I recall correctly. So they do generally have a few more per year than 45, but not a whole lot. So, but yeah, it's a few hundred, I believe, altogether over the course of a number of years that they've been able to serve. So yes, there's still space requirements, limitations in these spaces.
The Madison ordinance only allows for 30 shelter spots, so I guess the assumption is then that some are partners or families that have multiple people in one shelter.
Yeah. Yes, actually, it's 2 people per shelter, per sleeping pod, so it's. I asked her to estimate. She said around 40 something, so I estimated 45 because we don't have the exact number. It changes at any given point, but yes, they're coupled up in the spaces.
Mm-hmm. And then. What are the other, measurements of efficacy? I know you talked about like it being an adequate space for, living conditions, but are there measurements from these programs around helping folks transition into stable housing, indoor housing?
Yeah, so that was this. Okay. So around the average is 45% of those of the people that are living there are transitioned once they leave. So they all keep track of what happens once people are exited, as they call it, and 43% of them on average, that's a rough average, go on to be placed in permanent housing. What I don't have is how successful, meaning how many years were they able to stay in permanent housing, right. Which is another number that you would want to determine efficacy, but because these initiatives are fairly new, we don't have that number. Also, there weren't a lot of definitions, and cities were using slightly different metrics there, so I wasn't able to tell you how successfully they were placed, but it's around 43% that are actually going to permanent housing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I certainly have more questions about this. Like, I'm kind of wondering what we're currently spending as a city on our encampment response. Like, what our numbers of folks living outside in Minneapolis currently are, and maybe how that has changed over time. Mm-hmm. So I am wondering if that's information that you have, or if I should just direct my questions to other departments.
Yeah, no, that is coming in part 2, is the costs that we're spending in our own city. I did include in the report a comparison to the Avivo Village costs, as well as their ability to place people in permanent housing. So in terms of costs, it's slightly more in Avivo, but not like out of the scale. More, but it's about $38,000 per year per client. And because the model is so similar, because they have the harm reduction approach, and because it's very service heavy, they're spending a lot of money on service provision, just like these spaces are. It's an appropriate comparison. Comparing it to a congregate shelter that's not doing a lot of rehabilitative services, probably going to be cheaper. Maybe I will find out in part 2. But it's more similar to the Avivo Village model than it is to any of the other types of shelters that we have.
Okay, thanks, Sarah.
Thank you. Councilmember Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair Ellison. First question, and thank you so much for this enlightening report. I did not realize there were as many cities that were doing these kinds of projects, but I'm curious to try to understand what's the difference between outdoor, because all of your examples, I mean, people are living in structured spaces.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how that qualifies as outdoor. And then secondly, do we have willing operators in the city of Minneapolis beyond Avivo that are willing to operate outdoor spaces? And I guess third, do we have city-owned properties that would be able to accommodate these kinds of outdoor spaces?
Yes, the last two questions are questions I will hopefully explore for the second part of this report, although I did speak to Hennepin David Hewitt, who did not think there was necessarily a service provider readily available outside of Avivo. But I will speak to a wider variety of actors on that question. And the availability of land, I think that's a question to be explored subsequent to this, but I will speak to the hypothetical nature of it. So when I speak to staff, I will ask if there's hypothetically some spaces available that might be used for this that would be appropriate. So, and the first question that you asked is, yes, it's not that much different than in Avivo because it simply doesn't have, it's a kind of a typology of shelter space, right? So it has the individual spaces, no outside walls, a communal bathroom. I think the experience of it is somewhat different for people using it, but it's sort of created it's a type of shelter. It's being used. The villages, the tiny homes, the portable structures, the tents, these are all being used in similar ways in different cities as this sort of harm reduction approach. And it's not that you can't have those kind of spaces with walls. You can. Avivo Village is a prime example of it. But for whatever reason, it's those types of villages and spaces, the outdoor spaces that have, they require you to walk outdoors to go to the bathroom or do your laundry, that are being adopted in this way, in this sort of rehabilitative space for adults only. Like that's kind of the model that cities are using this for. But it's not necessarily that it can't have walls.
In some of the spaces that you have looked at, are folks required to commit to a rehabilitative process?
That's a very good question. They did vary in that regard. So in Seattle, they actually will exit clients who do not engage in casework. So everybody's assigned a caseworker, and if you do not have at least 3 meetings with your caseworkers a month, you can be exited from these spaces because they're trying to reserve them for rehabilitative purposes only. In other cities, there is encouragement and incentives, but not mandated. So you won't be exited if you're not engaging with your case manager, but you may be moved to a different type of shelter. You may be, there are consequences, but it's not required that you engage in rehabilitative services. They report that around between 70 and 85% are engaging. They have ways of encouraging people to engage. But the degree to which that's being mandated seems to be different in different cities.
Do you have a sense of the average length of time people are staying in these outdoor
Yeah, it's
spaces?
actually about a year. It's about a year. And part of that, they say that a lot of the operators were telling me that it's sort of grown over time. And part of that is because it depends on the type of rehabilitative services that people need. But if they need addiction services or substance abuse treatment, they'll leave and then come back to their space. So you have to account for the time it takes to actually overcome addiction. So that's why the average is about a year in Seattle and in Portland and in Madison. It's a little less than a year, but it kind of it's a little less or a little more than a year in most of these places.
And then I guess my last question, do they have multiple outdoor encampments? Because
Yes.
I mean, we have one here already.
Yes, you do. We do, yes.
So they have 8, 10.
It depends on the size of the
50,
city.
I mean,
Yeah. Yes, they do. They have, in Portland, they have 6. I think that is perhaps the most. Seattle has, though, a large number as well. And they tend to use them, they sort of group people according to their service needs, or according to, they have a space for queer people in Portland because that's people who want to live next to other people like them. So they have identity group based spaces, and then they have sort of service oriented spaces. So they're trying to create a space now, for example, for those who have gone through substance abuse treatment and need to be in a space where nobody is using alcohol or drugs. And so they're creating sort of an outdoor wellness space. So they're trying to differentiate the spaces in order to deliver services a bit more efficiently. That's one approach that different cities are trying. So they have multiple spaces. Madison, Wisconsin has one. Duluth has one. Smaller cities have a lot fewer. But multiple spaces seems to be much more the trend.
all right, thank you.
Thank you. I know Councilmember Rainville has a question. I had one question, and then I think we'll be ready to conclude the meeting shortly.
So thank you. I have a question, some comments for round 2 that I'll be looking for information on. The question is, in one of your slides, I believe it was Seattle, 43% of the people transitioned into housing. What happened to the 57% that did not transition?
They moved on to different shelters, as well as some would go on to not permanent shelter, so meaning they would be staying with friends or staying with family, but they not on a permanent tenure, so they weren't included in that 43% that went to permanent housing. So non-permanent tenures was a big chunk. Seattle was the only one who counted and was able to tell me how many did not return to homelessness. 98%, because only 2% went back into homelessness. Other cities did not track that number or did not want to tell me. So presumably some of them are going back into homelessness. But yeah, it's usually permanent tenure, non-permanent tenure. Some are going, very few or some are going to prison or institution. And then some are probably ending up back into homelessness.
Thank you. So the other information I'm interested in when you come back to us is how the county gets involved in these other cities, and what your initial conversations with Hennepin County, if you've had some, I hope you do, what their involvement would be. And then how do these other camps handle drug dealing, weapons, sex trafficking?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Raymond. And I had one question, but I also wanted to say this is a receive and file based on an analysis of these programs. This isn't necessarily a recommendation. I don't know that we're necessarily that I think I would totally welcome my colleagues to author something, but this is an analysis of what we've seen, not necessarily a recommendation for the council to do X, Y, or Z. And so I just wanted to make sure we understood that. The thing I was curious about, and maybe you don't know this so far, but maybe in a phase 2, I think a big part of some of the appeal of a safe outdoor space has just been, regardless of addiction services, rehousing, permanent housing, has just been rates of hepatitis, rodent infestations and the rate of infestations. These informal encampments can have sort of bad conditions in and of themselves. And so by having these structures, at least some of the arguments I've heard from other electeds in other cities, it's just like, we were able to maintain an outbreak of X, Y, and Z disease, or avoid one altogether. Were you able to have any info about, even if it was anecdotal, about cities that felt like they were able to address some of those things? Or the ways in which these structures deterred or diminished some of those outcomes?
Chair Ellison, yes, we did have a case in Denver. I mean, Denver was, it's basically with COVID. So, and a lot of these places were started with COVID. So you can see where the impetus or after it. But Denver certainly started its tent spaces as a way to contain the spread of the disease among the houseless population. So the efficacy of that, I don't have any numbers on that. Per se, I wasn't able to, I'm not even sure if they collected numbers on that, but I think it was just an assumption that because it's outdoors, it's going to be less likely to spread.
All right, well, thank you so much for the presentation. I look forward to phase 2 of this info, and appreciation to the authors for pursuing information on this. I know that this was pretty heavily discussed back in 2020, 2021 here at the city, and we didn't move on a strategy the same way some of these other cities did back then. But it's still worth us seeing, and now we hopefully have some proof of concept or some lessons learned or some cautionary tales, all of the above, in order for us to understand what these strategies can do and not do. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, seeing no further business. Oh, sorry, Councilmember Chowdhury and Councilmember Jenkins.
Okay, yeah, thank you. No, you go.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair, I appreciate it. And thank you, Ms. Renner, for your presentation and work on this. As one of the authors of the legislative directive, really appreciated how robust this analysis was. I know within it there's walkthroughs of the 8 cities that you looked at on how they facilitated this program. And one thing that felt clear is each city had its own individualized systems and different ways of approaching it based off of what was best for that area. And there's just ongoing changes. And so I found that to be really valuable. So just wanted to give my compliments there. And I'm looking forward to the second part of this. The one question that I have off the bat is, could you share just through your research and analysis the difference between the encampments that organically occur versus safe outdoor spaces, both in the realm of public safety, public health, outcomes, supportive services, however you want to take that question?
Councilmember Chowdhury, yes, there's a world of difference between an encampment that grows organically and these are managed spaces. So there are almost very few similarities. The degree of crime taking place, at least around Denver's safe outdoor spaces and tiny houses, actually decreased after the introduction of these spaces. Duluth reported to me something similar, although I'm not sure they have the data. They just went on the basis of having no police complaints last year. But when a space is 24/7 staffed, there tends to be a stabilizing effect on a neighborhood. There's at least the Colorado study and some of the reports back from the operators that I have to quantify that, but there's not a lot of robust studies across these spaces. So that's in terms of the impact on the neighborhood. In terms of the impact on the houseless population, people are receiving their basic needs are being met, including in terms of medical care. So you're having a reduction in terms of emergency medical visits. You're hopefully reducing also incidences of overdose deaths. And you are also, so you're meeting basic needs, preventing medical crises, and hopefully with the presence of the site operators, which is not always an easy task for the site operators, but they are also preventing conflicts and fights between people who are houseless. They're trained in negotiation and conflict management, et cetera. So these are managed spaces without a lot of drama, without a lot of police complaints, in so much as the neighbors are starting to actually come around and not mind being neighbors to these spaces. So that suggests that they're quite managed. So you can contrast that with an unmanaged encampment that arises organically.
Thank you. Another just follow-up related in terms of how these spaces are different. In the report, you kind of shared a little bit about experiences that people have in avoiding traditional shelter. I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit and then share how safe outdoor spaces can be a part of creating access to supportive services to transition into permanent housing.
Yes, as I mentioned, Councilmember Chowdhury, as I mentioned in my presentation, there are a wide variety of reasons that people avoid, especially congregate shelter, but also other types of shelter. And those include the lack of privacy, the lack of security for their belongings is a big one. Just not being able to predict that you can leave your belongings in a place all day seems to be a big reason why people actively choose not to go to a shelter. So there are restrictions on their ability to store belongings. Sobriety requirements because you have an addiction is another reason. Shelter rules that exclude those with a criminal record. Concerns about personal safety and exposure to sickness. PTSD or trauma-related responses to congregate shelters. Discrimination against LGBTQI individuals, restrictions that result in separation from partner, family members, or pets, curfews. There are a lot of different reasons that people are giving for why they are avoiding traditional shelters. That there is a survey that was done in Denver where they were giving some feedback specifically on that. So therefore, the safe outdoor spaces provide an alternative place, which the evidence does suggest that at least some people who are refusing other kinds of shelter are going to, or are voluntarily going into the safe outdoor spaces. And just as they are, I should say, in Minneapolis is the Vivo Village, and they're receiving a high degree of services there. Again, on average, a rough average, 43% of those that end up in the safe outdoor spaces are going then subsequently into permanent housing.
Thank you. I'll just conclude with some comments. As our chair mentioned, This is a receive and file. This is a really helpful tool for us to have conversations about potential policies. As members of this body know, I am also an author of a notice of intent for a safe outdoor space policy. And that's because currently in the city of Minneapolis, we have a public health crisis around unsheltered homelessness that's been very well articulated and illustrated by the many encampments we've seen over the last years that have impacted the safety, health, and well-being of both unhoused residents and residents in our city that may be neighboring to them. This solution isn't a silver bullet solution, but it is one that can fit within a constellation of layers of work that we're doing. Currently, as Ms. Renner stated, unmanaged encampments lead to adverse impacts. And so this is an opportunity to create a space where there are supportive services, where there is access to caregivers, community, autonomy, some of the things that lead to positive outcomes. And what we do know is one of the most effective tools to reduce homelessness nationwide is rapid rehousing. And rapid rehousing takes a lot of time, investment, lobbying, getting money together, and people are waiting as they're trying to get there. And so having a transition point, in my view, can be really helpful. And I just wanted to highlight that in this report, it shares the success of getting people to permanent housing in different cities. For Madison, Wisconsin, we're looking at 70% successful transition to permanent housing. Portland, Oregon, 47%. Tacoma had a 38% rehousing rate. And then Vancouver, Washington, 50% were placed in permanent housing. And in terms of cost, the report lays out that $50 million annually is used by Hennepin County to maintain shelter. We know that there are many other costs associated with unsheltered homelessness, especially around the sweeps that take place in our city over and over again. I'm working on an ordinance that's about encampment reporting that could really tool out the costs encampment sweeps have in the city of Minneapolis, so we can look at that compared to potentially a much less cost of putting down investment for a safe outdoor space. And that's just something I wanted to share publicly that I'm considering. And then finally, I'll point to some state legislation that was passed, not this legislative session, but the previous one, that authorize sacred communities or religious spaces to be able to use their parking lots for micro units for tiny villages, an idea similar to this. So there's opportunities for partnership, and I think it's kind of chicken and the egg situation of being able to have a policy or a political willingness to do something in order to get buy-in from community members, service providers, and form partnerships between jurisdictions. So thank you so much for this presentation. I look forward to the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair Ellison. You know, I just wanted to comment. You mentioned that we had these conversations a few years ago, and I wholeheartedly agree that this could and probably should be a part of the approach to dealing with homeless encampments, housing instability, homelessness, etc. However, we had a lack of service providers willing to operate these kinds of facilities, and I'm not sure if that has really changed in those years. And we saw I guess I would call it a quasi outdoor encampment that had, quote, service provision, Camp Nino Kasi, and many of the challenges and problems still existed. They didn't go away with sort of, I don't know, sanctioned or unsanctioned, but it effectively was an outdoor space that still saw many of the challenges that are inherent in these encampments. And so if we can find some willing service providers to be able to operate these kinds of facilities, I would wholeheartly support it. I do question the 70% success rates in Portland and, other communities, because these are really pernicious problems, and they are primarily fueled by drug addiction, chemical dependency. And, that seems to be the underlying problem that many folks are experiencing. And that, drug addiction tends to lead to, psychosis, which could have mental health impacts. And so, I'm looking forward to the next part of this presentation, and hopefully we can find service providers that are willing to step forward and do this really challenging work. But as it stands today, not many have come forward beyond Avivo, which we are funding and operating. And I guess I would ask, is the next part of the presentation going to talk about what kinds of successes we've seen at Avivo Village? Are people moving into permanent housing? I haven't heard that there have been a lot of challenging criminal behavior at these places, though. People don't always willingly share that kind of information. But it would be interesting to understand what is happening with the facilities that we currently are operating.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I will be looking at that in the next report.
Right. Thank you. I did want to just add, just because we both lived through those times governing at that time, and it was definitely very, very challenging. It's still a very challenging situation. I do want to say, I do think that what Avivo does is fundamentally different than what a lot of these programs do, because it is indoors, right? At the end of the day, it's not structures in a field or in a parking lot. It's structures, under, well within doors that had, and so I think that what they do is fundamentally different in that regard, and probably adds to a little bit of the higher cost and some of those other things. This is a strategy that I think can work. I believed in it then. I believe in it now. But to be kind of like, the old guy on the council, I would caution that it could be successful, to your point, Councilmember Jenkins, without significantly more buy-in, right? In some ways, the term chicken and the egg was used, and I think it's an appropriate kind of analogy, because in some ways, whether or not there are available parcels will have everything to do with whether or not the county, the mayor, the council agree that staff should be looking for them, right? In some ways, whether or not a service provider feels confident that they could step up and actually do this and not be left holding the bag or being the bad guy when resources run out, is to know that they've got multi governmental partners that are sort of in it, side by side with them. And I don't imagine we'd see too many service providers step up without that. And so I would count Avivo as one of those service providers who wouldn't be willing to step up in that way without that, because I think what they do is indoors, even though Avivo Villages is a unique model that sort of sort of splits the difference between what's happening in an encampment space and what's attractive about it, and what's attractive and successful about shelter, right? It kind of splits the difference of those two. And so I just, to my colleague's point, like, yes, we could go ahead, and even if we passed a policy, it would exist on paper without, and on paper only, without a significant amount of buy-in at multiple levels. So that's all. But I really appreciate the discussion. Well, I'll check one last time. Is there any other comments or questions for staff? Thank you so much for this presentation. I think we're all looking forward to part 2 of this presentation, and seeing no further business before this committee, I will declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you all.